Hi friends and companions along this path of spiritual practice. There are turning moments in our human condition when we occupy an opening from suffering into something healing. When we can occupy an opening that turns our condition from one of oppression into one of liberation and reconciliation. In Buddhism, this is understood as awakening. And for Christians, as we move through this Holy Week, this awakening is known as Easter. For the early followers of Jesus, this turning moment that presented itself from Friday's crucifixion to resurrection into new life on Easter morning. I think about the early gospel accounts that name 3 individual encounters where the early followers had with the risen Christ. Mary Magdalene, Thomas, who is also called the doubter, and Peter, who denied his teacher not just once, but 3 times over. I think about this turning moment for Mary Magdalene. The story tells us that it was still early in the morning and it was still dark. But Mary is going to the grave to make sure that she has done everything responsible to care for the body of her beloved teacher, Jesus. She's got plans and she's busy. She's there to take care of things. And as she's busy, she does not know that the person who is approaching her is not the gardener as she assumes. She does not see that this person is the risen beloved teacher. Jesus speaks to Mary, calling her by name. Mary, Mary. It's at that moment that something turns for Mary. Mary, who has been very busy thinking and acting and doing and planning out there in the world, perhaps because inside her heart, the grief and the pain is just too real and too much. It's when she has her name called that perhaps she can come in touch with that grief and with that pain. And she recognizes that the one who has called her name is none other than her beloved teacher. That's when Mary turns and is reconciled to herself. We are told that Thomas, this doubting Thomas, may have felt that everything that's going on in the external world is just a little too much. When all the disciples have been huddled together and discussing things among themselves, we are told in the early stories that Thomas is absent, perhaps because all of it is just too overwhelming. Thomas, who needs his own private self. If Mary has been busy with externalities, Thomas needs to be inside, protected from all the busy and overwhelming things in the world. It is only when the resurrected teacher appears to Thomas and calls Thomas out, saying to Thomas, Thomas, reach out with your hand and place it in my side. Feel the wounds. Touch me. Know me. It is only when Jesus summons Thomas to come out that Thomas has his turning moment, and he proclaims, "My teacher, my Lord," and he recognizes the risen one. The third person is Peter. Peter, who has betrayed and denied knowing his teacher not just once but 3 times over. The gospel stories describe that morning when the risen one approaches Peter, and over a breakfast meal, Jesus says to Peter, "Do you love me?" And Peter is challenged to respond, "You know that I do." And Jesus asks 3 times of Peter whether he loves him. 3 times to remind Peter, and none of this is lost on Peter. He knows exactly what he's being reminded of. It's almost as if for Peter, the difficulty, this turning moment that's required of Peter, is to reconcile what's going on inside and what he does on the outside. If, Peter, on the inside you confess your love for this teacher, then on the outside you need to be faithful in following his teaching. It's as if for Mary, Thomas, and Peter, they are each presented with an opportunity to turn, to awaken. Whether we are busy with externalities because to face what's going on inside is just too much, or just the opposite, we want to hide out inside because all that is happening in the external world is just too frightening and overwhelming. Or whether our inside and outside need to be reconciled with one another. As this Holy Week proceeds, I wonder about our spiritual practice of taking our seat and being present with wonder, open-hearted engagement, and courageous action, so that we might be fully present to occupy those places of fear. And as we do so, that we might claim a greater truth, a greater wholeness, a greater healing for ourselves and for the life of our world.